All right, everyone's in. All right. Hey everyone. So this is Econ times FBLA, EconXFBLA speaker series. And this is our Thursday's seminar. So today from 11:30 to 12:15, Mr. Alagu Periyannan will be our speaker. He's the co-founder and CTO of BlueJeans. Tomorrow at 3:40 to 4:25, Mr. Steve Hadilius from Economics at UC Berkeley will be joining us for his seminar. So just a quick norm check. So it'll be 45 minutes long and a Q&A session at the end. If you guys have any questions at the end for the Q&A session, please send them to me and I'll ask him. Please keep your cameras on when you're and stay muted when the speaker is talking. Listen and be respectful, and this event will be recorded, so please don't be inappropriate in the chat or just when you're just stay muted. All right. Oh, my bad. So just a speaker intro. He is the co-founder and chief technology officer for BlueJeans video conferencing. It's a multi-million-dollar company, and he's been in the business for a long time, for over 20 years. And he's going to be talking about things he does at BlueJeans and kind of his background towards working at this company. Take it away, Mr. Periyannan.
Awesome, thank you, Pramesh. Thanks all. I'm actually, just going to be spending some time talking. No slides or anything. I'm not going to bore you guys with a bunch of, BlueJeans slides and what BlueJeans is about. We are a competitor to Zoom, so I guess I haven't been in a Zoom call in a bit, so had a little bit of trouble joining here. But yeah, I'll talk a little bit about background of myself, and then we'll go into. I know this group cares a lot about business and entrepreneurship and all of that. So I'll talk about a few tips and lessons, based on my journey. So that's kind of what I'm going to talk about. So to jump in, I've been here in the Silicon Valley for I think I'm going on my 29th year as of 2021. So I came here in the early 90s. I don't know, all of you probably weren't around at that time. And I started working, so prior to that, born and brought up in India, moved here to come finish my undergrad in electrical engineering over there, and then moved here to come to grad school. Was in North Carolina for a couple of years at NC State, did my grad school there. And then pretty much early 90s moved to the Bay Area to start working at Apple. That was my first job out of college. So those of you, sort of care about, what Apple was like back then, it was much smaller company. This was even prior to Steve Jobs coming back to Apple. So I was there when that all happened, when we acquired Next. If some of you sort of studied the history of Apple, that all happened in the mid 90s. So I joined early 90s. I was there for a few years before we acquired Next. I was part of the QuickTime team there at Apple. And so if you've played around with a lot of Apple's sort of music and video products, you probably know what QuickTime is. So I was one of the founding members of the QuickTime streaming team, which is sort of the early days of internet. QuickTime was more of a video authoring tool on the Mac. And we brought it on to sort of doing streaming and all of that on the internet. I actually worked on the first video chat app on the Mac in 1995. So and this was, pre-current internet days where we had to use modems to dial into the internet. So that's kind of, I'm dating myself there. So that's what I did at Apple. Worked on video and video chat and all of that. And then pretty much after that, I've been doing sort of startups. And so I, sort of done 2 startups. The first one was more in the content delivery and streaming space, sort of a good follow on to some of the early sort of video work I did at Apple. It was a company called Entera, which then got acquired and became a company called Blue Coat Systems, which is now part of Symantec. And so that was a company that initially started off, building content delivery networks. Essentially, these are networks that are more to do with how video is delivered. So if you're watching like a Netflix movie and all of that, how does that get delivered across the internet? And so that's what we worked on. And later that technology got sort of adapted into more of the security space, which is, as large companies provide an internet access to employees. So we started selling our gear to these companies so that they can control what type of internet access they can have. And unfortunately, I can tell you, some of the technology got used by, large countries in the Middle East as well to control, how much internet, was accessible and all of that type of stuff. So think of it more as a firewall / filter where, you could sort of pick and choose what sites were allowed. And today, if you go into work at any company, there is some level of control, unlike when you're at home and you're accessing the internet, you can just access anything. So that's what I do. It's a company called Blue Coat Systems, which, we were public, then later got acquired by Symantec, which is a security company. You've probably used some Symantec products like antivirus and all that kind of stuff. So that's part of Symantec. And then about 10 years ago, I started BlueJeans. I'll talk a little bit about my lessons around BlueJeans and I use that as some examples of some things that you can take away from the stock. But BlueJeans was before founding this company, by then I'd been here in the Valley for 15 plus years. So decided to take a little bit of time off. And what I did after leaving Blue Coat was spend some time in the venture capital side of the world, which is, where a lot of these companies, get money and investments in the early stages, but not so much as an investor, but as what is called an entrepreneur in residence. And you've probably heard, if you've sort of been reading quite a bit in this whole entrepreneurial space, you've heard the term EIR, which is essentially entrepreneur in residence. And what an EIR is tends to be somebody who's been an entrepreneur before or wants to sort of start a company, is spending time with the venture firms. And then what happens is one of two things. One is you sort of, are working on your own idea. While you're doing that, you're sort of helping them evaluate companies, doing diligence and advising some of the companies. In some cases, what happens is you end up really striking a good relationship with one of the companies you're helping or advising that's part of their venture portfolio, and you end up jumping into it, either in a CEO role or some other executive role. So that's like a slight variation of EIR, which is a executive in residence. So you end up jumping into that company. In my case, it was more the entrepreneur in residence. So I actually used that time to ideate and come up with the idea for BlueJeans. And then, we founded the company about 10 years ago. I'll talk a little bit more about that journey. And today we are part of Verizon, about slightly less than a year ago, we got acquired by Verizon. So we are sort of the video app division of Verizon, and we're used in, we compete with Zoom and Teams, Microsoft Site and Google Meet and WebEx. And so, we're sort of among the top 5 players, although much sort of smaller than some of these other guys. So that's what BlueJeans does. What I was going to do is talk a little bit about my journey at BlueJeans and a few takeaways along those lines. So, many of you are, nowadays starting off very early in your entrepreneurial journey, and that is pretty exciting. Sometimes you're building apps while you're in even in middle school, if not high school. So, all of that, is very different from 25 years ago when many of us got started. But certainly, so that's very exciting. For those of you interested in entrepreneurship or business, you are probably reading just a ton of stuff on the internet in terms of blogs, and just so that you get more familiar with how other people are doing things. And you've probably heard about, how some of the ideation happens. Maybe you have some ideas and you're sort of looking at what others are doing with similar ideas. You always hear about the fact that, you want to go after a big market. You go after, you've probably heard the term product market fit. So, how does the idea that you have fit the market needs, right? So that's the product market fit, and getting that right is super important. So there's a lot of, pieces like that, pieces of advice that you will see. I want to talk about, 3 key things that you may not see, or you may see in various other forums and blogs and, places, other talks. And that is sort of, how do you sort of go about getting that initial spark for the idea, sort of, the ideation phase. And then I want to talk a little bit about change and how you deal with change. And then lastly, about people, because I think in the end, how you go about executing on an idea with the right people matters. So those are sort of the 3 things I want to talk about, but I'll weave into that, the BlueJeans journey. So BlueJeans, as I told you, is 10 years old. And when we started, we had a very, very simple premise. The idea was to be able to make the ability to join a video call like we're having today. If you went back 10 years, this was not easy to do. Video in businesses did not exist as heavily. People were doing a lot of video calls. From a personal perspective, Skype was by far one of the most popular, video apps out at that time. So that was sort of the backdrop in which BlueJeans was founded. We saw that there was a lot of video that you were using with friends and family. I mean, this was even pre-FaceTime and just around, iPhone was out, but the front-facing camera on the iPhone wasn't there. It was more of a, the regular sort of back camera was there. So that was the backdrop in which BlueJeans was founded. And our focus was really not on the consumer market, because we didn't want to go after Skype and some of the other, Google Talk and all of that sort of existed. That was a precursor to Hangouts. What we wanted to do was bring video to businesses. And this is where I want to sort of talk about a little bit about the backdrop around ideation to start a company. It's always easy to, to have an idea and really get passionate about it if you have empathy for that idea. So what I mean by empathy is you really have a personal need, or you really understand the type of user that will use this, whatever you're going to build, right? And you're able to feel that empathy. And that's how, for us, BlueJeans was formed. I was working as an executive at my previous company, even though, businesses at that time were largely getting work done over, they were all mostly in person, and you had email and those types of tools. But if you were not in person, if you were remote, it was audio conference calls. That's how work got done 10 years ago. There was 100 billion minutes of audio conferencing that was done on an annualized basis. And so if you got a job in corporate America, you would have been on like just tons of audio conference calls. That's how work got done. So in this backdrop at Blue Coat, we were still trying to use video. We had these video conferencing units sitting in our conference rooms. We had one in our Sunnyvale office. We had another one in in our Redmond, Washington office. We had another office in Waterloo in Canada. So we had these, room hardware video systems, and we would use it for like a once a week video conference call. And it would be pretty cumbersome to get that set up. Like we'd have to get the IT guy involved and all of that. Like, it just wouldn't work that well. So in this backdrop, we were still, one of the early companies that were using video, because I had teams in all these 3 places. And then later on, I had a team in Austin, another team in Eastern Europe, in Latvia. And if I wasn't using video back then, and I'm talking about like early 2000s, I felt our teams weren't collaborating as well. I mean, if you're just hearing other people who are at the dark end of a phone call, conference call, you don't get to see them, you don't get to interact with them, the body language, all of that sort of is missing. So you're taking all of that for granted today during this pandemic and everything else, but that wasn't the case before. This type of ability to easily join a call just did not exist, 10 years ago in a business. Most of it was pretty cumbersome. So that was the backdrop in which, when I left Blue Coat, I felt that there was all the technology pieces that needed to make this happen were there. There was video compression technology. There was, different types of audio technology. There was, by then the internet was beyond, dial-up modems, and the, network speeds were pretty decent to be able to do video calls like this. So in 2009, 2010, when we started the company, we said, what would it take to get all these businesses around the world using video in as easy a manner as they use audio conferencing, because that was pretty pervasive. So at that time, if you walked into a company that had a conference room, you would typically see like a little speaker phone or something like that on the table, right? That's a sort of a standard feature of any kind of conference room. And people would know when they walk in, if they were invited to a meeting, they would know how to dial a number, punch a few more digits, and get on one of those calls. But if they actually saw a large TV, and even today, like, video equipment in a conference room, they wouldn't not know what to do to actually get a call going. That was the state of, back in 10 years ago. So we came up with a very, very simple premise, which is we wanted to make the ability to join video calls as easy as audio conference calls. So people would just naturally, easily know how to do that. But to do that, we had a lot of different challenges back 10 years ago. Firstly, there was no single, piece of equipment from a set of vendors that would actually all be able to talk to each other. Unlike in the audio conferencing world, if you had a phone and you knew how to dial a number, that's all you needed. So when people invited you in an audio conference call, they never asked you like what kind of phone you would use to dial into that call. I mean, that was just a crazy question to ask. That's not your business. It's whatever they want to do. If they happen to be in the office, they would dial in with their office phone. If they happen to be, with a mobile phone or like a home phone, they would just dial in wherever they are. That's up to them. You just invited them to a call. So we wanted to achieve that for video. And we had this like really fragmented set of, if you went into a company, they had all kinds of different, they had companies like Cisco and Polycom and, all these other sort of gear that really wouldn't talk to each other. So that was one of the first ideas. To make this all real, we had to make a video system that would allow anybody to dial into it. So what we did was we said, okay, what would it take to actually build something like that? We would have to make companies that build the video gear open it up so that they can actually talk to us. We would have to build a sort of a bridging system in the middle that would make all these different systems talk to each other. And at that time, one of the most pervasive, video clients that existed. I mean, some of what you see today like did not exist. There was no BlueJeans, there was no Zoom, there was no Microsoft Teams or Google Hangouts or Meet or any of that. Skype was by far the most popular, desktop video system at that time. And so we actually worked on what would it take to build a cloud, internet-based conferencing service that would allow any of the high-end, enterprise level conference room systems like Cisco, Polycom, all of that dial into this system. And at the same time, allow anybody with any phone to dial into it, if they're not on video, to just dial into as an audio conference call, because that was the old way in which things were done. So you needed a way to bridge the old to the new. And then lastly, we said we wanted the most pervasive client that existed in the world at that time, which was Skype, which was used by 300 million users back then. We wanted that to actually be able to dial into our system. So that's kind of where we started. We said, and the way we approached this was, we didn't know actually how to do this. We just created a pitch deck saying, if we were to build a conferencing service that would allow all your enterprise conference rooms to dial into it, any Skype client to dial into it, and any phone to dial into it. If we were to create something like this and offer this to you as a subscription, Mr. Customer, would you buy this, right? And we went around and we didn't know how to actually build this, but we put a whole pitch deck together and started, doing the rounds of just talking to customers. And that is one important takeaway that I want you guys to have, which is not only do so something like this came out of a personal pain. So we had empathy and we understood what this problem was. And so that actually gives you the excitement that you actually want to solve it, because if you solve it, you personally would use it yourself, right? But that's always not enough. You want to see whether customers would use this. And that was something you want to do fairly early. And we did it like pretty much without actually having the product. We just had a pitch saying, can you actually build this? Can you use this if we build this? We got some really great feedback, this was 10 years ago. Now, the interesting thing is, how do you go about building this? Because one of the things about Skype was that it was a completely closed system. They were unwilling to actually open it up in any way for us to work with it. So this is also some, the second part I want to sort of talk about, which is, once you sort of get the ideation and all of that, you're not gonna, if you're gonna start a company and you're gonna build something, whatever you start off with is not what it's going to be like, a couple of years into it or 10 years into it. It's going to morph, it's going to change, it's going to, you're going to have to sort of face some of the ups and downs and the challenges, right? So our first challenge really was, while people loved this idea of us building a interoperable conferencing system that would allow all these different systems to talk to each other, they liked the pitch. If it was there, they would buy it, they would use it, they would pay money. But we didn't know actually how to build it, because one of the key pieces of the pitch was to take something that existed like Skype and make it work with the system, and Skype wasn't willing to open up. So that was one of our first sort of challenges. And this is where, persistence as an entrepreneur and luck at some point will intersect. You can't basically expect like you to get lucky, like you got to work hard at it, but then it will, at some point sort of come through. And what happened at that time, and this is 10 years ago, was Skype, while they were not willing to open up how to communicate with the Skype clients, they were actually building a Skype app that would run on TVs. So they were basically gonna, build a Skype that would run on Samsung and all these, there was the early days of smart TVs, and they wanted, they were on desktop and they wanted, to get more traction. So they wanted to, build Skype for TVs, but they happened to actually build it around what's called an SDK, which is sort of the core of the Skype client. So you could actually run it on a TV, build your user interface on your TV. But they had a version of that actually that was running on just regular servers. And so what we we said was we would take this and we would figure out how to actually run this thing that built to run on TVs. We figured out how to run like a few hundred copies of this on our servers. And that's the way in which we basically, you would dial into the BlueJeans using just plain old Skype. On the other side, it would think it's talking to the Skype running on a TV, but it was actually running on BlueJeans servers. And then that would actually allow us to pull the audio video out of that Skype call. And then on the other side, bridge it to other Skype calls or to enterprise, conferencing systems like BlueJeans and things like that. So, Cisco and Polycom and all of that, right? So that's how we sort of got around something like that in our early days. But so this is a little bit of a story weaved around how in the initial sort of ideation should work, where you have some empathy for it. You also need to talk to customers fairly early, and then you should be ready to sort of make changes. And as we went through the rest of our 10 years, we've gone through even more changes. Skype got acquired by Microsoft. They pulled this SDK from under us. So we actually then made our own app at that time. So we didn't actually have an app earlier. Now we do have an app similar to how Zoom or WebEx or any of these guys have apps. And similarly, we made other changes along the way, like in terms of our target customers. We started sort of really going after some of the larger companies. I mean, companies like Facebook. If you get ever invited to a call with Facebook, you're actually using BlueJeans. All of their conference calls are done on BlueJeans. Companies like Coca-Cola. And so we started really going after the larger enterprise markets, companies doing conferencing. So you got to be sort of ready for change. And then the last part really I want to sort of talk about is people, right? It is really important that you can hire and attract and motivate the right people in any early company, or even if you're trying to do something right now in high school. It's really about the set of people you convince to come and be part of your team to build something, right? If you're building an app or whatever you're building. And the reason that's important is, a lot of, younger and early entrepreneurs tend to do a lot of things themselves. And they tend to feel like, they need to be in charge, they need to be in control, of every detail. And that's all a good thing. Like, I think it's really good to be very detail oriented in your execution of whatever idea you have. But in the end, you have to be able to influence other people to join your mission, right? That is the multiplier. You cannot build anything large and significant just by yourself. And you got to realize that like fairly early, like you have to use that multiplying effect where you influence. I think you've all lived here in the Bay Area for a while. So the market here is very competitive to attract people, but it is important that you attract good people to your endeavor, right? And then motivate them, because that's what is a multiplier. Now you hear about all these great successful companies, and you tend to hear about the founders there, but I think every one of those founders will tell you that they couldn't have done it without being able to attract and influence, people to come and join their mission, right? You take any of these iconic companies that exist today, whether it's Apple or Tesla or any of these. I mean, it's not just about Steve Jobs or Elon Musk. It's about the people they've managed to attract to join them and really help execute. So I think with that, I'll probably, wrap up and literally leave the rest of the time for questions. Takeaways are, the three things. I mean, you'll read a lot in many other blogs, but really make sure during the ideation you have personal excitement and empathy for the idea that you're building on. That's important to, make you wake up every day and be excited about coming in. Second, be ready for change, because that's the only thing that's constant in any kind of startup. Every couple of years, there'll be a fairly significant changes. And lastly, make sure you attract, good people, whether it's a small project or team that that you're trying to build, or if you're trying to, build a company. So with that, I guess I will hand it back to you, Pramesh. I don't know how you want to do Q&A.
Yeah, for sure. So if you guys have any questions, just message me privately and we'll ask Mr. Periyannan. Okay, we actually had some couple questions already. So someone asked, how were you able to attract the right talent and form a complementary team, especially in the early stages of BlueJeans?
Yeah, so one of the things, though I had worked in the video chat, as I said, like back in the early 90s. After that, I did not sort of work in video. So when we actually came at this problem, we were somewhat outsiders to the video conferencing industry. So one of the things that we put a goal, the early team, we basically said had to be 50% from outside the video conferencing industry and 50% from within the video conferencing industry, so that we sort of take, both a new way of thinking about the problem, as well as some, we didn't want to make all the existing sort of mistakes. So we wanted to build, people from within. Today, and this is again early days of LinkedIn, but today you take it for granted. I mean, LinkedIn is an amazing tool. Like, and in 2010 or 2009, definitely was used heavily in the tech industry. Today, it's used much wider than the tech industry. But what we did was, for the 50% that we wanted from outside the industry, those were people that we had worked with, and we knew they were good athletes that we wanted as part of our team, so we attracted them. The 50% that we wanted from the video industry, we used LinkedIn to really go and surgically strike. What I mean by surgically strike is we identified specific people who had done some good work at other companies and said, I want to talk to that guy. So we actually had a recruiter, her full-time job, she was one of the early members that we hired on the team, is we would identify a specific person, and no matter whether they're in the Bay Area or the East Coast or wherever, the job was to go find a way to connect with that person and get them on a get them on a Skype call. This was prior to when we actually had our own tech. And so that was, we really identified exactly who we wanted from the industry at that time.
Here's another question. Someone asked, who is your biggest role model, inspiration, influence, and why? Whenever that question is asked, I find it really tough. I mean, I think there's a lot of amazing people here in the Silicon Valley. I mean, you guys should be fortunate where you are today. You just have a ton of role models. For me, like, rather than a specific person, when I see somebody do their job just extremely well, I mean, they are just really good at what they do, and there's many examples of that. I try to learn one small piece from how they're going about doing it. Whether it's some of the iconic sort of names here of entrepreneurs in the Valley. There's always, a couple of things that you want to take away from how they do things. So for me, role models are, I look at somebody, whatever they're doing, they're just doing it really well. Understand what that piece is and take away from that. We have another question. Someone asked, what was inspiration or ideation behind the name BlueJeans?
Oh, so yeah, that's always, that's a classic question that all our customers ask. And interestingly, Krish and I, when we founded this company, so actually, my co-founder, who both of us together founded the company, both of us were EIRs. We needed a placeholder name because we were working on different ideas at that time, and we it wasn't sure like, what space it was going to be in. We looked at a few ideas in the security space as well. And so we needed a placeholder name. And so we just came up with BlueJeans because we didn't want anybody to know what we were working on. And after we, honed in on the idea and we started the company and all of that, we used that as a placeholder name to get it incorporated. We couldn't get the domain initially, but then we knew we were going to find a different name, like, when we launched the product. But I can tell you, we spent 6 months coming up with all, some god-awful names and did not like any of it. By then we were into the company. We were known for, we started talking to customers, they sort of, BlueJeans sort of really a name they could just remember. So we ended up sticking with the name, and it sort of brought like a level of casualness to something, since we're going after the enterprise market, it brought that level of sort of comfort and casualness that a pair of BlueJeans will bring, to this. So we decided to stick with the name. I mean, we did end up having to, there was a squatter on the bluejeans.com domain who wanted a 6-figure number for the domain. So I'm talking about 2011 when we were trying to buy the domain. And we were, scrappy entrepreneurs. We were not willing to spend that much money. So we were trying to bargain down to maybe a few tens of thousands. But I mean, he didn't budge. And I think in 2012, we ended up buying the BlueJeans domain. And we paid, a 6-figure number, not a huge 6-figure number, but we did hit the top domain purchases that year in 2011. I mean, today, like, I think the top domain purchases are well into the 7-figure numbers.